Hi, it's Suze from Balanced Birth Hypnobirthing, and what I wanted to talk about tonight is the fear of birth, or shall we call it the birth of fear. If you've never had a baby before, why should you be fearful? Why are you fearful? Normally it's because what we have been told by our friends and family, maybe our mothers, sisters, aunts, what we've seen on the TV, in media, or read in magazines. But if you've never given birth, what exactly are you scared of? Is it the pain? Is it because you've heard these horror stories? Is it because you've heard that labour can go on for 48 hours? What are you fearful of? Is it pain? Usually that's the answer. Usually women are frightened of pain. But again, if you've not given birth before, how do you know that it's going to be painful? Generally, there's a widespread belief that birth is a scary experience that needs lots of medical intervention, lots of drugs often offered quite early on in pregnancy. They talk about what pain medication you can take. So instantly, the woman is starting to doubt her own ability to birth in a calm and positive way, and that she will need some sort of help to manage the pain. Birth is not now seen as an exciting part of the journey, as this passage towards motherhood. It's seen as a means to an end. You have the pregnancy, you've got this horrible bit in the middle, which is birth, and then you've got your baby. As far back as 3000 BC, birth was actually celebrated, and women giving birth were revered as godlike deities. They were the givers of life. They were bringing life to into this world. We can even look at so much as early Grecian medicine, where you've got physicians and gynecologists, early physicians and gynecologists such as Hippocrates. You won't know much about him other than the Hippocratic Oath stems from his work, and a chap called Soranus. And they wrote a lot in their books and their studies about how women need to be in a calm and relaxed state in order to give birth effectively, and that they'd noticed when women were largely unattended and left to enable them to get into this calm and relaxed state, they birthed easily and comfortably. Jump ahead a little bit to when the Bible was starting to become available, and people were able to read it. And there's such a thing as the curse of Eve. So because Eve was of the original sin, she had to suffer during childbirth. Whether you believe in God or not, the Bible is one of the most read books in the world. So if there is a portion in there that says about pain during childbirth, that is going to be accessed by an awful lot of people. So that gave rise to this dogma, this dogmatic law, that in the belief that birth is painful. Okay, let's skip ahead a little while into the Victorian era. Now, what do we know about Victorian medicine, Victorian hospitals? Yeah, dirty, no infection control, often drunk doctors, using the same implements on various people, someone dying of the plague next to you while you're giving birth. So not really nice places to be at all. The reason people were going into hospitals to give birth and not staying at home is thanks to good old Queen Victoria, who used chloroform during childbirth to cope with the pain. So because royalty do something, the masses want to do it, but because chloroform needed to be administered by doctors, women were going into hospitals. So they were going into this terribly dirty environment, and they were actually dying of childbirth fever. So it then spread that childbirth could kill you, and actually it wasn't the childbirth at all. People were contracting infections and actually being attended to by ill-equipped doctors, medical negligence, if it will, back in the day, and that's how they were dying. So, and speaking of royalty, they actually have a large part to answer for in why we do the things that we do, particularly when it comes to birth. If we go back to the time of Louis XIV, someone check me on that, he's actually the reason why women lay down. A lot of women lay down. He had a mistress, and men didn't attend women's births at all. But he wanted to see what was going on. So a screen was put up in the room where this mistress was giving birth, and she was squatting, as was usual practice. It's natural. You've got gravity to help you. It feels more comfortable. Because he couldn't see through his little peephole that he'd created, he demanded that she actually lay down. on the bed. The problem with this is, I'm going to get my pelvis here. Okay, so this is the pelvis. You'll see we have our coccyx, which is the remnants of our tail. So when we're in an upright position, the coccyx actually can move back. There's nothing pressing against it, and it can move back, and actually it makes the opening, where the baby's going to come out, a lot wider. When you're laying down on this coccyx, you can see that it pushes up and actually makes that opening a little bit narrower. And trust me, when I say millimetres do count in birth, so this can flex quite a lot. So the most natural position is to be like this. Also, if you're laying down, for the anatomy of the vagina, you're going to be pushing your baby uphill, okay, rather than allowing your baby to come down naturally with the help of gravity. So thanks very much for that. I'm getting off track. I want to talk about Dr. Grantley Dick Reed, and he was a doctor practicing around about 1920s, 1930s, and his books are widely recognised as being the sort of first real written experience of someone observing hypnobirthing practices. And although he doesn't use the phrase hypnobirthing, he talks about deep relaxation and breathing, which, as we know, is what hypnosis is. His book Childbirth Without Fear really is the sort of Bible and good real starting point if you're interested in reading about hypnobirthing and the history of where it came about. What he talks about is he observed and attended many births across London, both from the wealthy and also for people who were poor. He observed massive differences in how the ladies behaved during childbirth, and physiologically he knew there couldn't be that many differences, and it had to be something to do with their status. Educated, wealthy women, you might say, were screaming, writhing around in agony, in apparent absolute torturous pain when they were giving birth, and they required chloroform, and it was standard practice by then to offer chloroform to help them cope with the pain. He got called to many number of births from the sort of poorer sort of sector, and he'd race across London on his bicycle in the rain, and he'd get to a labouring woman and he'd offer chloroform, and she'd say no thank you, and she'd kind of grunt and breathe this baby out. And he said to one lady, why didn't you take the chloroform, you know, for the pain? And she said, oh, I'm sorry, doctor, I didn't know it was meant to hurt. So the uneducated women hadn't been exposed to this knowledge about childbirth and how it's meant to be painful. So they were relying heavily on their intuition and their instincts, which is what hypnobirthing has to reteach you to do, because we have to unlearn all of these societal stories and this dogmatic law that we seem to have adopted, that childbirth is painful and that women are unable to cope with this very natural process that we are designed for. So that's why I call it the birth of fear, because there are certain events in history that have led up to and gathered momentum to add to the rise of this. What hypnobirthing, and particularly what my course aims to do, is to unlearn all of that, to give us the coping strategies that we can use during childbirth, the breathing, the relaxation, the guided visualization, because we need to undo all of that, and it's so heavily instilled in our brains now that we have to do a little bit of work to undo that, so that we can surrender to birth, so that we can use our intuition, birth intuitively we refer to it, and to make sure that the medical professionals allow us to do that. And sometimes that means making sure that we have volition and our voices are heard, and this is where our birthing partners are really, really important for us. So I hope you enjoyed that little skip through history of birth. On the course I cover it in a lot more detail, and obviously we go over some of the finer points a little bit more, but if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what my course has to offer, please give me a shout on my website, on Facebook, send me an email at hello@balancedbirth.co.uk. I'd be really happy to have a no obligation phone call, Skype consultation with you to discuss in a little bit more detail. So that's it, I've been rambling for long enough, and I've got my new banner up, as you can see. Yeah, trying to get a little bit more professional. So yeah, I look forward to uploading another video soon. Take care.